Just want to reiterate, Kevin, you count. All right, so we'll bring the meeting to order. And our first order of business is to approve minutes from the previous meeting from January 12th, 2023. And unless there are any comments or amendments, we'll place those on file. Hearing none, we'll place those on file. Great. All right, so we booked about 20 minutes to talk about the climate action plan consultant process. In truth, we've now, I learned this past week that we can't really say much about this. And so there are some things we can share, correct?
Yes,
we can share the names
Yep.
of the entities that have bid.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you want to go through those, Hank?
Sure. So we received a total of 5 submittals. One was from Armando Energy Solutions. The second was from Blue Strike Environmental. The third was Kim Lundgren and Associates, also known as KLA. Fourth was Riverstone.
It was Riverstone.
Just Riverstone, but in combination with Beacon Integrated Solutions. And then Weston and Sampson was the last. And the subcommittee is going through the review of those now.
Right.
And I don't know if can we let everyone look at the submittals?
Not yet.
Yeah, it's just within the subcommittee still, right? Yeah. And so as that process wraps up, we will, hopefully in the March, April timeframe, be able to move forward with the consultant.
Yes, so hopefully by March, we should be able to move forward.
Right. So that does actually bring up a topic or something that we can talk about later during future business. We have an early March meeting of the CAPC. I think it's March 9th. And so we'll talk about, whether or not we want to reschedule that to later in March. If that might be a good way to try to sync up with the CAP selection process, or there's a possibility that we could try to get some special topics on that next March meeting. So we'll talk about them later, but one of the ideas was to see if we could try to get Eversource in to address the CAPC on things like our grid. Is our grid ready? Which is very hard thing to get any. That's right. To be very specific about, and I'm not sure why it's so difficult to get somebody to be very specific about something along those lines. Okay. But maybe we could talk a little bit about the consultant when we do have a consultant on board. We talked about the RFQ, right? Because that's public record. Mm-hmm. In the RFQ, what we asked the consultants to come up with is a schedule, and we gave them a set of tasks to walk through in their proposals. And so the first part of the engagement will likely be just getting them up to speed. And so that's going to be sharing with them the output of these, the working groups that you all shared. So that's I think one of the reasons why we've been assembling those and getting those ready for a consultant. So I think I've got 5 of the 6, and I got your note, Rachel, for tomorrow. So I appreciate that. But there'll be a period of time when they're going through those. We also listed another set of documents that we'd be sharing with them, including the charge of the Climate Action Plan Committee. I think we had the greenhouse gas inventory was listed in that as well. And then did we say anything about our green communities annual reports in the RFQ.
I think
Yes.
we mentioned it.
We mentioned that as well. All right. So those are probably the bare minimum documents. It's possible that we may share other things as well. Work that's been done in some of our buildings to date. The history of the solar array, et cetera.
Plus the overview slideshow that was assembled as we were
Right.
beginning this process.
So yeah, so there'll be a period of time. And so one of the things that I think will happen after they've gotten a chance to review some of those materials, they'll want to address this committee and make sure that they walk us through their methods, their process, as well as if there's any questions that they have about how to proceed.
Right.
And then I anticipate we'll probably also be calling the working groups back together. So I think we talked a little bit about this last month. But if you haven't already, it would be good to reach out to those working group committee members and let them know that there's a good possibility sometime later this spring we'll reunite as a large organization, so all 50 or so, because there may be additional discussion that the consultant wants to engage in.
And I think broaden the discussion to other people in need.
Right. Yeah. That's something that we were definitely interested in finding out from the consultant, would be what is their methodology and approach for engaging a larger slice of the public. 50 is a nice big group, but we're 30,000 people in Needham, is that right? Give or take.
32.
I'm looking at you because you usually have all the stats.
That's right.
I know, I think the
Trees, how many trees?
11,700 households.
Right. So, any questions about our consulting process? Because we do have time here.
This is less of a question, Stephen. But for the record, I don't know if we made it official that I recused myself from the subcommittee due to a potential conflict of interest. Putting that on record.
Yes, we need that on record. That's a good point. So Nick did recuse himself, and Paul was added to the committee.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, Paul stepped in on short notice, so it was very.
Which
very
is
useful.
really appreciated, Paul.
You're welcome.
And we didn't have to vote on that, did we? Right? We just made a decision on that one. All right, so I'm gonna look at the clock. We have 15 minutes before our next agenda item.
Let me tell you about my day.
Some people should.
Stick with the agenda. Stick with the.
Well, if anyone didn't get the full RFQ, it is posted on the town website. And all the steps, the tasks are itemized there. There's 6 primary tasks with a lot of subtasks and deliverables. I think it would be very important for each of the subcommittees to think about how to broaden the discussion. And perhaps some of these will be, some of those future meetings will at least be Zoom and or maybe on the Needham channel in order to be able to engage more people. As we all know, the municipal contribution to the greenhouse gases is just a small sliver of the total contribution of greenhouse gases within Needham. And so engaging and encouraging and identifying all the opportunities for both grant funding, federal tax breaks and other things will be important to pull people in, make them knowledgeable about those opportunities, and hopefully get larger engagement in the process and acceptance of the transition.
Right, so we should possibly be thinking about, are there organizations, and it could be grassroots organizations, associations, membership groups, that we want to start identifying who are the influencers in those groups in order to motivate their larger constituency to participate in the process. There's areas I think where we're going to have natural, easy. A lot of the working group participants themselves come from those groups.
Right.
But I'm concerned about organizations that aren't represented in the 50 people or so that we have here, and they're large ones, right? Large slices of the electorate and demographics that are not represented today. So we'll have to put our heads together and really help the consultant identify the people that we need to bring into the process. Any thoughts from those on the phone? Nope. All right,
To some degree, the working group sheets give some of that, but we don't go into a lot of detail, particularly in terms of community groups and demographics, but it's a starting point.
right, yeah.
Under the key partners.
Yeah,
Are there groups, Nick, that you felt like we need to do a better job at reaching out to?
I mean, I think some of what you said as far as members of those groups, of some of those groups are members of working groups. There's also sort of, we've got to, I think, do a little more to suss out kind of the silent majority, so to speak.
Right.
And people who aren't obvious, but that have voices to hear or are going to have opinions because they're out of the loop.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think that's something that the consultant hopefully can help us identify, gee, in this town, we found that we really had to reach out to the hockey parents or something.
Right. Right. I think in the houses of worship, for example, we do pretty well in some of the Protestant churches, as well as Temple Beth Shalom, but have not reached really much of a constituency in St. Joe's and some of the other houses of worship. So that might be another place to look. We have contacts.
Yeah, and any side channels, because I reached out to St. Joe's about my committee and heard nothing, my working group.
Right. Mary Ann's in that parish, I believe.
Yeah.
So
Good.
maybe some connections there. And then Natasha, I think in an earlier meeting, you'd stressed the need to try to get a lot more of the students.
Yeah, I think that's really important, that demographic, which is really active in all of this and already trying to figure out how to do some of this work.
Yeah. And we should think not just the public school. I think we kind of gravitate towards one of the public schools, but there's St. Joe's or St. Seb's.
Right.
Who else am I missing?
There are also Needham students in other schools. I don't know if it's, that's a more diffuse category, but there's still students from Needham.
Right.
Olin
And do
College.
Olin
we have
College.
Olin College involved?
We had Claire Rogers from Olin College. So she's involved with the climate action plan at Olin.
And also the president of Olin is soon to become a Needham resident.
That's right, Dr. Barbie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did a recent presentation, I gather, over at the library.
Yeah,
Yes.
they're building our president's house.
Ah,
right on Great Point.
Yeah.
And I think she had expressed interest in trying to make sure that her students and faculty continue to stay involved.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few faculty there. Claire Lynch is one of them, who's from Needham. One of my other neighbors is an adjunct over there, and they've been through class projects reaching out to Green Needham and other organizations. So there might be opportunities to build on that. I'd also say neighborhood associations. I mean, there's probably a few neighborhood associations that we could reach out to and see if we could get representation from. So just kind of
What
think
about-
about that.
Sorry, what
then-
about League of Women Voters and other groups like that?
Yeah, League of Women Voters is actually we have several members of the league were in our working groups. Karen Price, who is a former president of the League of Women Voters Needham, is in the governance group with Rachel. But they do have pretty broad membership, and we can always go deeper there. They do tend to be very active, which is good.
How about the Exchange Club? Or groups like that?
Exchange Club would be great.
Yeah.
Mo's in the Exchange Club.
Yeah.
Michael Grice is in the Exchange Club, I believe. Artie. All right, so there's a handful there.
Every single day.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's an opportunity there. I tried to see if we could get the Climate Action Plan Committee in front of the Exchange Club this year as a guest speaker, but their docket was booked. So we will try again. I think they start looking at they have sort of like a fiscal year.
Okay.
So.
One question, Stephen, do the traditional service clubs like the Rotary and the Kiwanis have much of a presence in Needham, or am I talking Norman Rockwell times?
I don't know that
You
offhand.
just garbled. What do you say? Yeah.
I don't think the Kiwanis Club has. They have that.
Rotaries.
Rotary.
There is a Rotary,
Yeah,
and then there's
and they have a
Knights
pancake
of
breakfast.
Columbus.
Knights of Columbus.
Yeah. We could always look at VFW as well. I mean, there's a lot of constituencies that I think we may be overlooking, and we should try to bring in a little bit more. There's something else I was going to say, but it slipped my mind now.
League of Women Voters also does a civics program when they did a town hall, the juniors.
The one for the schools.
The school,
Yes,
yeah.
I guess Civics 101.
Yeah, and they did a
lines.
big basic civics fair.
Right.
And almost every one of the students was doing something on solar energy.
Well, Natasha, were you
Right,
at that?
You were at that.
I was at
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Yeah, because I remember you came back pretty excited and jazzed about that.
Yeah.
It also, that project almost seems like it ties in with the NEF, the education, although they're
Right.
granting. That's a
I
great,
think there were about 20 students, right,
yeah,
that were interested out of the 50 or 40 or whatever, for different initiatives. I have to find a way of connecting with them. I've been talking about it, I haven't done it.
Yeah, and you know Hans Batra at the high school, right?
Yeah, I know him well because I used to be a robotics coach,
Oh, no kidding.
Lego robotics.
Many hats, Natasha.
I know, I'm a little tired.
Is he the head of the environmental?
He's the head of the environmental club there. He also has been involved with robotics. His first robotics, I can't remember if it's first or another one, but for a number of years.
I mean, maybe we see whether they could put together around Earth Day a climate and sustainability fair.
Try that. Also
Talking about
the-
Earth Day. So I used to be with Debbie Schmill and a couple of others. Debbie Schmill started Green Kids Newman many, many years ago. I started that same year or the year after with her, and then I took it over. So the green kids and all the elementary schools, that's a great way. That's a great connector.
So could we all just maybe to take an action over the next few weeks to start reaching out to some of these contacts, letting them know where we are in the climate action plan process and asking them if they'd be willing to participate actively? I mean, not the same way the working groups did, but we're not going to be doing a multi-meeting, but there might be public meetings, hearings, things of that nature. And we just want as many voices and perspectives included. So I'd say if we can reach out to them now, give them a heads up. That'd be good. How are we doing on time here? 2 minutes. What does the select board do when they get ahead of an agenda?
They go ahead, except if it's a public hearing, then we have to wait.
Oh, okay. So can we go ahead?
Oh, yes.
Okay, yeah, then I'm gonna go ahead.
Okay, 2 minutes.
All right. So the next one's actually gonna be a pretty quick one too. I think we were a little ambitious to think about this as a half hour. So has anybody been following the budget process for the town?
Yeah.
It's not in the budget. The sustainability coordinator did not make the budget this year. So I think Kate's looking at putting it into the 2025 budget,
Yeah.
25?
the fiscal 2025
We're
budget.
doing 24 now.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Sounds a lot further than it is.
Think July 2024, July 2024. Right, yeah. You want to give us a rundown? or-
originally, there was hopes it was in this year, but it's not. It's in for next year.
Yeah.
Although Kate Fitzpatrick is saying she's looking for funding to see if there's an opportunity that she could bring someone in.
Right,
But she's still looking.
yeah. I mean, there was some discussion about whether or not ARPA funding might be made more flexibly
Right.
available for like a grant writer.
Right.
So one of the concerns I think we all have is that there's a lot of competitive grants that are out there today. And they're not going to be there in a few years,
Right.
right?
Right.
I mean, you already have a new Congress that's looking to roll back,
And clawback money, yeah.
claw back from the IRA. So if we're going to go after some of these grants, we probably need to do it this year or next
Right.
year. I did look at one of the grant programs, and I should have written it down, but you might have seen a notice that came out recently that there was a competitive grant process through the IRA for municipal block grants. And what, I don't know the whole federal
Right.
procurement, like why this works. Cities were allocated amounts. So like Newton, Brookline, Watertown, they were written right into the block. Now, the cities still need to apply for the funding to get the
Right.
block grants in order to spend it on what they.
Okay.
But there was also, I believe, $50 million in competitive grants that was, again, they were block grants. And I don't know what the formulas would be for a town like Needham.
Right.
But because we're below 35,000 and we're not in the top 10% population in the state, we didn't qualify for one of the standard grants.
Okay.
But I think that's the type of thing that we would hope.
Right.
If Kate's able to find a grant writer this year, we can start looking to fund some of the projects that we're putting in front of them. Because we have a number of things that we're looking at this year. I mean, the CEA is just one. But there's some zoning bylaws, for example, that I think we're looking at.
Right.
I don't know what sort of support the planning board or the town might need around some of those things. Those could be potential applications of grants. And then what about Emery Grover? Is there anything we could fund at Emery Grover to make it greener?
Well, the school department put in a grant application with for MAPC funding with, I think, 30 other towns to look at EV buses.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay, so they did put in
They put in an application, and it was with other communities within the region. So hopefully, because it's such a broad application could be used by multiple communities. And I don't know if you've seen lately, Boston is now beginning to roll out its EV buses
Didn't see that.
They did, yeah.
They
With-
just started.
with a commitment, I think they have 10 or 20 with a commitment to turn their entire fleet to EV by 2030,
Wow, that's
which is
They have a-
hundreds of buses.
a large fleet.
And I think they're going through converting the buses. Is that correct? Or maybe, I don't think they're buying brand new
I
buses.
don't remember, they issued an RFP for it and I don't remember what
No.
it's in, I think I threw it in Paul's working group folder.
Okay,
So I know the school department, Robbie Abdallah was looking at that grant funding to figure out whether there'd be, well, group purchasing potential with these other communities. Whether the state would get pricing out of competitive bid process that they might do if there were sufficient interest. I think the Needham Public Schools were looking initially at the first 2 buses that they own. And one of them, I think, is up for replacement in FY 24.
okay. So they put it into budget for this year?
But then there's the issue of the cost differential. There's a cost differential. And whether the cost differential could be made up through grant funding.
Right, and then there's the charging that they would have to put in for that as well.
They'd have to put in level 3 charging. We've had a preliminary discussion. They've had a preliminary discussion with Commonwealth Electric and putting in potentially, initially 2 level 3 chargers into the parking lot at the back of Newman.
Which is also where they want to put the solar array, correct?
That would be the first priority for a solar canopy.
Yeah.
But of course. Funding.
Funding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Anybody
So-
here want to write grants?
Right.
Anybody, has anybody here written a grant before?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it was, okay, besides, it was, yeah.
Long ago.
I would love it if we could have somebody else do it.
It's time consuming. We talked about it briefly with Dave Davison on Tuesday, whether or not an intern would be able to, a summer intern, if we could turn them on to some grant writing this summer.
at least grant researching what the opportunities would be.
Yeah.
And college kids can oftentimes read instructions and oftentimes find out how to fill in the blanks.
Right.
I don't think it'll be IA software.
right.
So Hank, is there, if, do you happen to have a wish list? Like if you had a sustainability coordinator on staff this year and a climate action plan in place, is there a list of projects that you would say, could we go see what we can do on these? And you just mentioned a few of them,
Yeah,
but is it a bigger list, or is that, I mean, like, do we hone in on those because those are the ones that you thought of?
well, it depends on if you want to take the initiative through the municipal operations or through the larger piece of the pie,
Right.
which is the businesses, the
Yes.
residents. And so for maximum effect, I think we would, if you want to do both concurrently, I doubt we'd be able to get much. Well, I put it this way, the sustainability coordinator would probably be able to put together a very strong website that tells people how to get grant funding on their own. And projects like the EV
Test drive.
test drive are sparks that can hopefully literally encourage people to move in that direction. The programs that Green Needham has had with Solarized Needham. I think waves of those, another wave of those might come up with opportunities. And likewise with converting to all electric. The highest benefit from the greenhouse gas perspective would be those houses that are heated by oil.
Right, right. So that would be an interesting campaign, because I think we could get that, that's a public record, right? The houses that still have oil or.
Might be another
They-
good topic for a summer intern.
Yeah, I think when we looked at the last solarized component, we pulled, Michael Gray somehow pulled the quantities heated by gas, electric, propane, and oil. Now I know the property record cards are not always 100% accurate, but
They could be dated too. Somebody could have switched to.
well, yeah, and this is something that permits don't often track. If you pull a permit, it may not say this is a conversion from oil to gas.
Right.
Or you're pulling the permit to do HVAC work. It doesn't show that you're putting heat pump in.
What's the high school program that they do a spring semester with multidisciplinary
Greater Boston Project.
Greater Boston Project. If each of the subcommittees came up with a recommendation for a Greater Boston Project for students, and we laid it out there and said, will you come back in your final project and report to this committee?
That should be pretty good.
I would think that would be,
So Greater Boston projects can be on any topic they want. They're not specified in advance.
I'm not sure.
any topic that they have great interest in. That I think, don't they have a theme every year? Overall theme?
Be interesting to find out.
And these are individual student projects or team projects?
Teams.
And the whole exercise, I think, is to prepare students for college. Being able to identify a topic, research a topic, group work together as a team on reporting, and then making a final presentation. And they're graded, I think, on all of those.
Yeah.
When
And when you say it's Greater Boston, it has to take place within the project has to take place within the Greater Boston.
Not necessarily. It
Could
can
it be
be
needed?
broader.
Could it be needed?
Greater.
So if one of those projects was knocking on the door of every home that has an oil tank.
Or, it could be public outreach. I think they're probably a little less enthusiastic about that, but they might be able to reach out within the student population and say, anyone who is interested in converting to an all electric, and by the way, your house has oil currently, we'd love to talk to you, that kind of a thing. And so I think we could certainly offer up ideas.
Yeah.
There was one I went to that they wanted to put EV chargers at the high school,
Right.
and so they asked, how did the town put them in at Sunita Williams? How did they go in elsewhere? What's the process you have to go through? Can we get it done by fall?
I point to the boxes behind you.
They look great there.
Wonderful.
But I think that kind of student enthusiasm would be great. And if we laid out a bunch of topics, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, very good working group.
So that's
They
like,
may have already selected them.
so I think I guess why I launched this topic initially, bouncing around a little bit, but the idea was we don't have a sustainability coordinator for the next year. we could either just do nothing and continue to just focus on the plan. That's not nothing.
Right.
That's nothing. That's
Well-
important. Or we could see if there are a few areas that we could advance the ball down the field. And
I would say few areas. I think there's some grassroots efforts and I mean, I know you were at the planning board meeting this week. I couldn't attend in person, but I sent everyone the information about zoning that you had sent me, that Oscar Mertz and others. So we're starting that conversation. So I think it has to be grassroots. We can get the schools involved. We can do certain things that I think could, would be beneficial and can move the needle.
so I do actually have a contact who unfortunately no longer lives in Needham, but who was very involved with Needham for a while, who has experience writing grants. And I'm not volunteering this person, but I'm wondering if there were a wish list, like, for example, helping offset the cost of electric buses or the chargers at Newman. If we could identify a person like the person I'm thinking of and say, could you go research, bring the opportunities to the town, and then if you and Kate and others agree, have them write the grant and see, whether or not it can come in. I don't know if that's viable or not.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge is that there has to be someone on the, with grants, right? There has to be someone on the receiving end. If we do receive it, then somebody has to take ownership. Right. There's a level of accountability once you accept that money. So we have to figure out who, and that was, hopeful that we'd have a coordinator who could, make sure we're compliant with the grant. I'm not sure that we're positioned as a team, but we could tee it up to the town to say, if this is what we get, this is what we're going to need this level of resource to implement or action on it, and then just make that recommendation. I'm not sure.
I think the grant would probably still have to get submitted by the town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they're doing the legwork, right? Maybe they're filling out the initial paperwork.
I don't mean to, that when my kids were at Newman, there were a lot of parents that would write grants for NEF that who were grant writers or just good writers that who were not working for that part of their lives, and so they were willing to do things like that. And then also all the green kids, I mean, I think we got a grant for our kids to go to the Cambridge Science Fair, and we had all these things going on at Newman. So I would bring it up that there are groups already in the schools that know how to write grants or have or may be willing to try, and that may already have synergies with this group that I think we should tap into.
Good idea.
And I would say every grant has differing levels of oversight and like reporting
Yes.
responsibilities. So there might be some that somebody could write, Hank or I could submit, and then the reporting is very, very straightforward and simple. And then there's some, like, I'm thinking this wouldn't be for this, but like the ARPA where we're looking to hire somebody just for the reporting because it's so complex. And those would be the ones we would stay away from until we had a full-time position.
Right.
I guess for the EV, we did actually apply for and get grant funding, but there was a form, we filled it in. It was pretty basic.
And you sent it out. Yeah. And you knew about
Uploaded it.
it. Yeah. All right. So it sounds like there might be an idea there. I guess I would defer to Hank and Cecilia on whether or not it's worth trying to pursue. I know that Kate said she's looking for funding on this. But we, like Natasha said, we may be actually able to find somebody who's willing to donate their time.
The MAPC was still reviewing the Inflation Reduction Act. They have had one initial webinar about the opportunities there. Most recent one I didn't find very useful. Was mainly focusing on heavy infrastructure roads and part of the funding certainly it has to go to either labor unions or union labor or prevailing wage in order to get the money. That's one of the requirements. But they were going to be unpacking some of the opportunities and having future webinars, I think, as to what those opportunities might be. Federal government, I believe, was still going through their process to figure out who's managing which buckets of money and how it's being rolled out. And that still wasn't decided. And it was Cecilia, was Power Options also getting into that arena even?
I don't remember.
Are there any gaps on the Emery Grover project? Are they,
In terms of
they call it value engineering? Are they value engineering anything out of the green side of Emery Grover that we're aware of, or is all?
No, I mean, we did not have. We do not have solar canopy in the parking lot. In large part because it would be too small and too shaded.
Right, because of the building.
Yeah.
Where it is, yeah.
We are putting in 4 EV chargers. They'll be connected to the building. They'll be separately metered. We're putting on. We will be putting on separate sub-meters for the key mechanical systems. So we'll be able to evaluate what the actual energy use is. It remains all electric. Natural gas will not be coming into the building.
That's great.
And
that's settled.
Yeah.
That's
that's the design. And currently.
And do we have all the grants that we could possibly get?
Well, EverSource gives rebates.
Yeah.
And in order to get the funding that we're looking for, we have to go through the initial application. We did a calculation for the energy use intensity,
Right.
EUI. We're targeting under 30 EUI. We're working through the details on the window submittals, those kinds of things at this time.
Is there any possibility to get additional funding through IRA as well? Feds?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, if we had selected geothermal, that would have been a possibility. But when we first looked at it, the payback was more than 50 years.
Right.
Because of the exorbitant cost of the wells.
The drilling.
Now, had we gone that way, and at the time we made the decision to go to air source heat pumps instead of ground source. The IRA was not out there. We didn't have any details.
Right.
So
Makes sense.
couldn't proceed on the project with that assumption. We are looking at the life cycle cost assessment for the new RTUs at Broadmeadow and Elliott.
Okay.
And the designer's going through that evaluation now. And and also energy code issues. All of those will have to have energy recovery wheels.
Okay.
As part of the replacement rooftop units, just to meet the new energy code.
This is the stretch code that just got updated.
Yes. And they're evaluating the base case, keeping natural gas going up there versus having air source heat pumps supply the reheat versus actually resistance electric.
That's not a good one, is it? Resistance electric.
It would be it is counterintuitive, but your first cost on that is significantly lower
For the
than
install.
putting in adequate capacity for air source heat pumps. And with the energy recovery wheel being so efficient, the use of that resistance electric is minimal. It also takes up a lot less space within the box. And so there's an evaluation of whether the new boxes, rooftop units fit on the old dunnage and the associated work you have to do to increase that dunnage. So it's gets into the structure, gets into a lot of different issues.
Okay.
And then there's the other complication of the summer reheat. I won't get into all these things.
Yes, you're getting deep, you're going deep.
I thought you were trying to kill time.
No, I was wondering whether just not, like, got back to this idea of like,
For the funding.
yeah,
Yeah.
grant sourcing. All right, so, how are we on time, Bo? We have a couple minutes left on this topic. I wrote down just a few ideas that we could try to focus on, outreach. Tasha, you mentioned, just the grassroots, trying to get, more organizations involved. You mentioned the zoning. Planning board actually has some work that it could be doing around some of the zoning and permitting, this year. It's probably, I don't know if special town meeting is an option. I did send some stuff over to Adam today that you and Oscar had supplied. So, my understanding is it's probably too late to get into the spring town meeting or the special town meeting, but maybe it's a fall.
Yeah.
So that could certainly help set some of the prerequisites in place that we need to do more of the work next year. And then grant writing, if you guys feel like it's worthwhile to explore. Obviously, we don't want to write grants that nobody can use. But if there's a shortage of staff time to write grants because we don't have a sustainability coordinator, let's see if we can find somebody who can do it for us.
Right.
I might suggest that the first priority action item, each category be considered by the respective subcommittees to see how some action could be taken on those specific directions during the coming year.
That's a good idea.
One thing that along those lines, I don't know if it was the first or the second recommendation of the net zero buildings group as far as talking about communication and resources. And I know we touched on that earlier, but that's an area where there's a lot of information that doesn't seem to be getting out in it.
You're talking about outreach.
Outreach, but also web outreach that, and tying in with the town if there were a sustainability page within the town's website, for example.
So that's a perfect segue to our next topic,
Okay.
which is community engagement around climate action plan.
You want me to keep talking?
Keep talking.
So, for example, at our last meeting, I was rudely trying to find the solar output from the RTS on the town. I've yet to find it. Somebody said, well, all you need to do is type in X.
Deep, yeah.
But so it'd be good. And Green Needham has a lot of resources, but I don't think they're really getting out to the broader community. So to work with Cindy and maybe the Green Needham communications people could work with her as far as.
So there's good information. So two things. PIO is going to be in the budget this year.
Oh.
I believe it's made it into the budget at this point, which is great, which means it's
Information officer.
Yeah. Public information.
office. But I do believe we're going to need a new PIO.
So the money FinCom approved for recruiting will be needed.
Right. It will be a recruiting position. So we may have a little bit of a gap. That's, yes, right. That's been announced.
I don't know, just officially.
Okay.
Yes, we just did.
Anyway,
Potential.
it's not done. So anyway, hopefully nobody's upset about that. Anyway, we will have to figure out how to make use of whatever resources. And one question I had for you, Cecilia, because I think you have posting privileges on the website.
Yeah, so me and a couple of my staff are responsible for maintaining the public works website, so we could easily
Is our climate action plan committee on the DPW website? Is that?
No, but I've been updating it. as
Oh, you
well.
have been?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I can take that over.
I recall, and maybe we could get clarification that Cindy was saying. There are do's and don'ts as far as what the town can link to. So you can link to a nonprofit or a utility, you can't link to.
Cindy actually said to me, try not to link anything to
Okay,
non-town. Because really, anytime you link to any organization outside of yours, you can't control their web organization. And all they have to do is move one director, and all of a sudden all your links go down, and then it becomes a full-time job for somebody like Cindy to maintain those links. And so her recommendation was, if you got information, share it outright on our
but if
site.
you're linked, if let's say you want to link to the Eversource. Programs or to Mass Save,
As high up the architecture as you can go. Right? So go to Eversource and search
right,
As
so
opposed to-
rather than,
a deep link.
yeah.
But I think her idea was, if we're gonna share specific pieces of information, try to embed as much of it actually into the web page itself. But I think Mass Save, I think we want to link into
Yeah.
the Mass Save website. Probably not a specific page within the Mass Save web page.
Residential business thing.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so in terms of engagement, there's a couple of things that we have on our calendar this year. One is the CEA generally.
Yeah.
And we have not yet started the process of selecting a consultant for that. And I think that doesn't start for
No, we're working on the RFP to go out early March.
early March. Okay. It's probably not a big rush because where the rates are right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't think we want to accelerate towards locking in these higher rates. But I do recall in the CEA toolkit
Right.
that one of the recommendations was to begin having public meetings as soon as you can around things like read my electricity bill. As simple as just what is my electricity bill mean? Like, what is this delivery charge? What is this fee over here? What's my generation charge? And so that could be for your working group, a way to advance the ball.
Yeah, which also, if we could get material to put on a town-sponsored webpage,
Yeah.
that, I mean, that's easy enough to come up with that copy. I mean, I think I have a lot of it, and now is actually a good time because once that first Eversource bill hits from January, there's going to be a lot of screaming, so it'd be a good time
That is true, yeah.
to say, well, what does this mean and what
Yeah.
to
Great.
what to look out for scans, because that's the other thing I've been told is once you come out with a CEA, all the electric suppliers come in and send these letters so that if you're enrolled with, whomever, you're not automatically opted in.
And I will say, we have the FAQ up from the Warren article when we voted on the community energy aggregation.
Yeah.
Already up, so we could make a full page with, just dedicate a whole page to that and start adding in information and documentation.
Which I can activate some.
So this is picking up on Hank's idea, like what are the things that we can do to push the ball forward now while we don't have a sustainability coordinator or plan?
Right.
But we do know we're doing the CEA,
Yeah,
right? There was, we'll have to go back to those materials, Nick, but there was a distinction made between what you want to say before you have a plan and what you want to say after you have the plan. So because it's going to take many months for us to get to a plan, we really shouldn't be talking about the plan.
no, we're just talking about, this is
Right.
your electric bill, this is because even people who are very knowledgeable say, well, I was talking to somebody about the CEA and what do you mean? I get my electricity from Eversource.
Right.
And it's a conceptual shift.
Yeah. I mean, there's several things we could do in a public meeting on this. one is reading your bill, two is understanding things like, how does Mass Save get funded?
Well,
It's
and-
right there on the bill.
Also,
right?
if we're addressing as a community forum, rate shock. You know,
Yes.
okay, my electric bill doubled, and it's not just because my husband bought an electric car. You know, well, here's Mass Save, here's some resources, here's things you can do.
Right,
And so it could be a good segue rather, because nobody wants to go to a page about my electric bill, but
right.
it's really.
But they might show up at town hall or one of the other, the library,
Yeah,
if we put on an event.
yeah,
That would be kind of cool. And then Needham Cable will pick it up. Yeah, high rotation.
Yep,
Let's do it.
I think we should do that. Yeah,
Just a rate shot, get the conversation going.
right. The more informed people are before the plan comes out.
Yeah.
The more receptive they'll be about what the options are.
and this also drives multiple messages, so it drives some of the stuff that the Net Zero Buildings Group was working on. in
The mass
terms of
saves and retrofit.
Mass Save retrofitting, communicating to
Heat
people
pumps.
what's out there,
By the way,
and transportation.
Joe's not here, so he wouldn't chime in on this, but there is a event on heat pumps that's happening at. Wasn't Ed Quinlan going to be the presenter? Do you remember this?
I should know, but I am blanking.
Was it through Green Needham?
Green Needham's going to be promoting it, but I suggested that the Climate Action Plan Committee probably want to get behind it too. I believe it was, I don't know if it was the league or if it was one of the churches that was asking for a presentation on heat pumps, and Ed Quinlan is going to be delivering it. So he's very knowledgeable about heat pumps, and it would be great to get that on our website as well.
Yeah.
So we had an event around the CEA of the heat pumps, and there might be other ideas.
But
maybe,
I
Joe.
think one of the things we need to do is not silo things, and the idea of making an event around rate shock or electric bill rage or something, which then.
Oh,
lays the
yeah,
groundwork.
don't get me wrong, probably a series of events, right?
Yeah.
And you're not gonna just. Whatever if you're talking about rate shock, you're gonna be talking about heat pumps, you're gonna be talking
Yeah.
about. Renewable energy, you're gonna be talking about other options that people can
And
use.
why you
Homes.
still should get
Massive.
that electric bill.
But then Paul's EV event, so that would be 3 categories potentially of outreach that we could be doing in the next few months,
That's tremendous.
right? So
Yeah.
that starts to feel like we're moving outside of our little ivory tower here.
And specifically
Okay.
having them sponsored, at least in part by the CIPC, to have it
I think
get a
that-
little more name recognition.
Yeah. So Paul, you were, I think, the first one who came up with this idea of going beyond our charge and starting these doing this EV show. Did everybody know what we talked a little bit about at the beginning, but maybe some people were a little late. Paul, do you want to talk about the EV?
Sure. So we have a plan really for May 13th, which is a Saturday, between 1 and 4. We're going to hold the event at Sunita Williams parking lot, and we have an EV dealer, Quirk Chevrolet, which is going to bring vehicles for a test drive. And we also have New England EV Association, which is a volunteer organization. And they actually do part of the advertisements to other EV owners to bring EV vehicles to our event. So these people basically go from place to place to EV show to EV show and showcase their own vehicles so that you get a diversity of vehicles that people can look at. It's up to the individuals whether they want to let them drive, but it does provide a variety of options for people to see. So we have Quirk, we've got New England EV Association involved, and they actually already put our event on their Facebook website as well, and I can share that with you. And we also have Landry's Bikes, who are interested in having an e-bike display test site there as well. So, we got a couple of groups that will be there. For our working group, transportation wise, our main two goals were to advance active transport with bikes and EV bikes, e-bikes, and then increase residential acceptance of EVs as their next purchase. So that's a pretty good start. And then, as I'm listening to what you folks have been talking about, I do think this does represent a venue for a lot of these things that we want to do, which means that it's a place where some of the efforts of the community, the Climate Action Committee, can put forth some of its information. I don't know whether we'll have a consultant by then, but it would be a terrific timing if we could have people meet the consultant, or like if they were actually there, it'd be really great. If we wanted to have a table there for Green Needham, and then what work we've done so far, or representatives of the working groups for some of the different things that we're looking at, I think you should feel free in your mind to think about how this individual event dovetails to how we can begin to show in person, some of the things we're doing as people are funneling through and seeing these things. So I think that's a really good opportunity for us, and consider it open for ideas that you have to bring more vendors or within our town site, as opposed to just having this being an EV show. So I think that's important as well. So I did want to determine or think about whether we wanted to have other vendors at this event. Do we want to invite solar, or do we want to invite heat pump vendors? Like, how far do you want to take it? A lot of these EV shows typically do a broad, sustainable approach here. And so I think you can take it as narrow or as broad as you wish. And then the final thing I wanted to say was that I would like to get the high school students involved. But I'm a little bit, I'm skeptical about whether they're going to have the bandwidth or time to help us. So the environmental group, this to me is like a really great segue for them to help and be part of something like this, but I don't know what people think about whether they're going to be able to do that. So, I think broadly about what you want this event to be besides a test drive for EVs, and we're happy to expand it.
One thing, a few years ago, we did a green expo that tried to bring a lot of things together. We did a couple. Did one at Town Hall, and we did one with Wellesley as well at their DPW. And that was a pretty big, it was a good thing, but it was a pretty big effort. And I think when you get other vendors in, and I'm not being a naysayer, you need the indoor space, you need the gymnasium, because May weather can be variable. And you may not want people out there a la, kind of like the Harvest Fair set up like that.
So I agree with Nick. When we did the expo, it was actually very successful. We had several hundred people come through Town Hall. The weather was terrible that day. So the EV drives were not as well attended as I think we were hoping they would be. And we had some electric bike vendors there as well, and nobody could go out on them because the weather was terrible. I would say keep it focused. My gut is saying, like, sometimes these events are a lot easier to pull off if you keep them focused. They're easier to promote. One thought I had was that I think sometime around then the Exchange Club does their car show, and I've always wondered, couldn't we combine these, like, because they do, like, muscle cars and there's no reason why, like, somebody who's into EVs wouldn't also be into muscle cars and vice versa. You know, old classic cars and things like that. But maybe the Exchange Club doesn't want to mix those two things.
Is there a fundraiser too?
It is a fundraiser too.
Can they have an EV category? Is that something to suggest to them?
I don't want to overcomplicate it. I just, you know,
No, I'm
Yeah.
saying for their event as a tie-in. And that might be a question to ask Mo or somebody within the Exchange Club. You know, when you do, you know, would somebody on the car show committee be open to
putting in a category.
putting in a category and or inviting some?
There was a news article, a dealer up in New Hampshire was selling the new Corvette, EV Corvette. And there were people lined up for 2 days trying to get in to get their reservation in. And I think they had a limited number, like under 100,
If they were going to be.
and they
selling
sold out.
it, just like that.
Get one of those
And then,
electric Mustangs.
Or
That's
actually, the F-150 Lightning would be a really cool one. I've seen
Yeah.
two in town.
yeah, if you know people who own one of those, they would come and display their vehicle at the event, that'd be great.
So, yeah, so Paul, back to you. I think the consensus is keep it focused.
Yep,
I mean, if there's an opportunity to do the Exchange Club, maybe we could make that connection. If not, keep it separate.
But I do think that, for example, the CAPC should have a presence at table banners, some kind of, you know, because there is a tie-in for us, you know, without making it a general festival.
Right.
Okay.
yeah, I'd like to see it. I'd like to see a tent or a covering where the table where some members of our group are there and can explain, you know, and offer some information. It would be nice. I mean, look, I'd like this to be a Needham sponsored event. Because if it's a Needham sponsored event, I think I can get advertising through the Needham Facebook advertising machinery, which would be a preference. Is there any way that can happen?
I think we're saying we're sponsoring it, right? I mean,
Right.
I mean,
We
I
are.
don't know if we're gonna get funding for it, but
No,
I think the announcement would be it's the Needham Climate Action Plan Committee is promoting an EV test drive.
right. And so that would be something that would help us to get on the Facebook or the weekly newsletter that goes out, for example, through the town of Needham. Would that be a problem?
That would
No.
be a slam dunk.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
just, you know, to make it official, I mean, so I'm not assuming anything, let's just do a voice vote on whether or not we want to make this an official sponsored event of the Climate Action Plan Committee.
Aye.
And Nick says
Aye.
aye. Kevin's aye.
Aye.
Paul's aye. Rachel?
Aye.
Great.
Natasha? You're on mute, Natasha. No, she might have stepped away. Natasha abstains.
I'm back.
Heard us.
Are you?
I'm still in my office and I had to, we have a big
I'll be
deadline
fast.
tomorrow, so I apologize.
We're voting on whether or not to have the EV show by Paul, an official sponsored Climate Action Plan Committee sponsored event. And the votes are 1, 2, 3, 4 ayes, and you're next. I or no.
Aye.
Right, and then the chair votes aye, so that's unanimous.
Are we also looking to use the town seal promotional stuff?
Once, yeah, okay.
I think we're a town.
What was the date again on that, Paul?
May 13th.
May
Yeah,
13th.
what time?
1
Yeah.
to 4.
1 to 4. Yeah, I actually interacted with a guy, Ed, I forget Ed's last name. He's sort of he's a EV show guru in Westboro. He's done multiple events. And he said a 3-hour window is really what you need. Longer than that, it gets too long. So I got a lot of good advice from someone who has a lot of experience with that, and he was willing to help us some more. So he's done small events and large events, and so there's a template out there for how to do this the right way, and I think we should be able to do this without a lot of work. I think that I think the food truck thing would be nice. We can talk about that, but I won't worry about that right this second. I do want to make it light or a little bit festive in a way, drawing people in to make it an upbeat kind of event, assuming the weather cooperates.
Um,
Are you gonna have a rain date?
Right, I guess I have to, huh? Yeah. So I hadn't planned on it, but I think I have to. So I'll talk to Quirk about that and see what other dates they have available that month. And so I'll try to come up with a rain date.
okay. Paul, do you have the contacts at Green Needham as well?
So I know Mike presented the event to the board, your group, and everyone signed off on it. And so, and I know Donna Bello is interested in helping me as well, which is great. And I'm still recruiting people from the working group who might be willing to help as well. So that's where we stand.
If you need more support, just reach out and we'll figure
Yeah.
out what happens.
Yeah, great.
So while we're at this, we had these two other ideas. One was a heat pump event. It's not a climate action plan committee event, but we'd like to promote it. Everybody's,
Do you have a date on that?
I don't have a date on that, but I can look it up and maybe follow up offline. But if I sent that date information to you, we could get that on our website and maybe into the news you need.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, newspapers.
and then Nick, you'll think a little bit about CEA events.
Yeah,
And then,
yeah.
maybe we can discuss that at a future meeting. Any other thoughts around community engagement? We're not going to really get I think a robust website anytime soon. That's probably going to have
No,
to
I
wait.
think,
That might even be an output of the climate action plan consultant. So in the meantime, we just make do with what we've got. I did confirm, though, that town is accepting non-town messages in the news you need.
Okay, yeah.
So I don't know how many of you may have received that email, but plugged in band, for example, had a registration notification that was sent out in the recent. So I think we can probably get this heat pumps event in there as well, even though it's not a town posted event.
yeah, I think. I'm just looking on the Green Needham website and. For example, the Congregational Church has a mass save forum.
I think that's the
on
one I'm
Earth
thinking
Day,
of.
which I think is the one,
And that's the one Ed quit.
April 23rd, 11:30 to 12:30.
Yeah.
11:30 a.m. 12:30 p.m.
Oh, and slightly related, but not really. Paul, on for the EV test drive. You
Yes,
should be to the Cedar Williams, if their weekly newsletter, get in there.
Oh.
And in fact, that they might let you jump into other school newsletters, but definitely at least Cedar Williams because it's active school. Right. So you'd probably have it in.
And that's a good tie-in with the.
Yeah. That's like,
Yeah, should probably reach out to somebody in town though about having access to the building. I don't know if they ever unlock it on the weekends.
So it's
We would
not
have to get
unlocked without a request. The permitting of school buildings goes through my department.
Oh, hey, look at that, Paul. You need to reach out to Cecilia.
well, when I put in the request, I left it till we didn't need a custodian or would like to keep it locked. I don't know what the preference is. Personally, I didn't want people, squirming around the building, because if it rains, there's no benefit to having the building open really, because this is a EV test and e-bike phenomena. So if it rains, it doesn't work out very well. But if you folks think that we need to have the building open because it makes it better somehow, then I guess I could request that.
I think you should consider that there'll be families with small kids there and there'll be emergency breaks.
Okay.
So having access to at least the restrooms would be really useful.
Okay.
It's, keep it on a Saturday and keep a rain date on a Saturday because it's a school or it's a town funded event through a town organization, there's no charge. If we move it to Sunday, we have to find payment for the custodian.
Fair enough. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another grant.
Another grant.
And in terms of the newsletter, I can reach out to Lori Donovan. She's the lead secretary there.
Great.
If you have texts that you want to get into the, I spoke with her previously when you first asked the question. She confirmed that they didn't have anything else on the agenda. Or other uses that were occurring in the building that day.
Okay.
And so it's our.
I am
calendar.
interested in recruiting some musicians as well. What would be really cool is if the Quirk guys can bring a truck, it would be kind of cool if we had some music that we could actually amp through the truck. So I don't know about where we would get the musicians, but I am trying to think of ways to, again, lighten up the event and make it a little bit more festive as well.
Wait, you think EVs alone are not festive enough?
We did the town hurdy-gurdy.
Yeah, Donna Bellows in the band.
Yeah.
The other
Plugger in.
EV events I've been to, they actually have several different dealers,
Makes, yeah.
different makes. You'll get that with owners coming. I think owners will be hesitant to allow test driving just because of insurance purposes.
Right.
And the dealers do take your license and go through that whole process.
And they're insured.
And they're insured. And so the ones I've been to, they actually had volunteers, but boards come in, sign in, because it takes, I think, at least 10, maybe 15 minutes for a test drive. And so people sign up to do that. And then then another group of people monitor who's next and so on and so forth.
That's a good point. When we did ours at the town expo, I think we had 3 or 4 different vendors, Toyota, Chevy. There wasn't a Tesla. There was a Tesla there to talk about power walls, but they didn't let you drive a Tesla that day. I remember that. Yeah, it would be good. And Hyundai and Kia both have really good EVs.
Ask a question.
Sure. Do you want to should we need to recognize you though? I think, right?
I don't know.
Did you say your name and your?
Sure, Rob Dangle, you know my address,
Sure.
28 US Circle.
All right.
If you're gonna do test drives, do you have to notify the neighbors and have a planned out route?
Typically, you need to this is what we were talking about earlier about reaching out to Lieutenant Carroll, who's the traffic enforcement and the police, and show the route. So that's what we did when we did the expo. We had the specific route that the cars would go on. There was a police detail there to make sure that any pedestrians that were walking weren't, in danger of being clipped by any of these EV test rides. So I think it's a good practice to get them in.
And I'd be willing to offer them my cars.
As a test ride.
Sure.
You got your Model 3.
Where's the Cybertruck?
Still plenty of Elon Musk's head. All right, so Paul, you have everything you need for that?
Yeah, I think we're okay. Just picking away at it and I'll keep you guys updated.
Okay. Cecilia, do you want me to be a conduit to get stuff to your website?
That would be helpful.
So rather than getting it from all sides?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So Paul, if you come up with a blurb that you'd want posted on our website, send it to me. I think you should probably also think about an announcement and then the news you need email that goes out, but you won't want that probably until April or so.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, yeah, I'll send you a link to the website that's already up in the Facebook for the New England EV Association, which actually gives a little blurb already, if that's helpful to you.
Okay. But definitely start thinking about what the route might be.
Yeah, I got to do that. Yeah, I got to do that. actually not a bad location because, Central Ave is, it's a nice strip to drive an EV in and make a loop. So we'll figure that out.
All right, so future business, I mentioned it earlier that the next meeting we have is early March. And then we have potentially later that month, a consultant coming on board. So I was of two minds. One was to see if we push back our meeting so it coincides hopefully with the onboarding of the consultant, which would be a very good use of everybody's time. Two was to see if we could try to get a presentation from Eversource to this group. And specifically, I think the questions that they keep coming up are less about the amount of electricity generation that's out there, and more about what the demand forecasts are at the local level and what the local power substations capacities are.
And I think also what their process is and what their time frame is. Because
Right.
I saw Eversource speak about Cambridge and they said, oh, we're scheduling the shutdowns for these new substations 5 years from now.
Right.
And that's how far out they have to do things. So
Right. Okay.
5 years.
Yeah.
So they're telling, for example, making this up, but people at MIT, okay, we're gonna need to shut down these buildings for 2 hours on May 1st, 2028.
Right. So I think the context here is if this committee, for example, were to recommend to the select board that we opt into the new specialized code, which, while it isn't electric only,
Right.
It really strongly directs builders to build electric only because it makes it very cost prohibitive to run natural gas into a building, but then also run all the electrical wires to be electric only ready for the future. Because that's what the specialized code does.
Okay.
It really kind of sets up the house for being converted to electric at a later date. And there's different pathways that depending on the size of the building, whether it's commercial or residential. But in general, if you read the code, it's really trying to put the thumb on the scale towards electric only without saying electric only.
Okay.
And so I think if we did recommend this course of action to the select board, and then it has to go to the town meeting.
Yeah.
One of the key questions that will come up very quickly is, well, what would the impact of that be on our local grid?
Yeah.
And I think a related question is if we don't do this, is it still possible that there's going to be a impact towards the local grid because Wellesley just passed it and Newton just passed it?
And the grid doesn't, the circuits don't stop at the.
Right,
either town.
exactly. Like there's a substation that serves a variety of towns in this area. So I think it'd be useful, I think, for this committee to be very well educated on this because it's the type of question that could come up at town meeting and may have an impact on how people vote. So if we could bring this together, that would be my preference if we could do that on the March meeting.
My hunch, and we haven't gotten, I don't know if you've had any luck reaching out.
I have heard back from Eversource. So I went through Neil Duffy at the Green Communities Division. He's our local, was our local. He just announced he's becoming, is it Sudbury or?
Something that we're looking for.
He's gonna be a climate action, he's gonna be a sustainability coordinator for Greater Boston, a suburban village, town, whatever. But anyway, he's leaving. He had put me in contact with a few people at Eversource. I sent them a list of questions, and this is like one of the questions, like what are, if we do this, if we go for the sustainability, the opt-in specialized code, what impact might it be? What about EV promotion? If we were to suddenly see a surge in EV ownership in our town,
Right.
what is that going to do for us? How are you doing your demand forecasting? Is it, do we need to give you a heads up before we go down these roads, or do you have it all covered? There's state funding last year of $500 million on grid modernization in Massachusetts that was approved for the three utilities. That's coming out of our pockets. It's not, it's not free money. But what is that being spent on? And somebody should be able to tell us, this is what's going to happen. We're going to have better demand forecasting for these microgrids that are popping up everywhere because you've got, solar arrays here and solar arrays there and a wind farm over there. Two-way electricity flowing.
Right.
All that stuff needs to be explained, and I'd like our committee to be pretty educated on it. So I think if we could get that would be a really good topic and keep it early March.
Do you think we could get somebody to speak with a reasonable level of detail on its relatively short notice rather than to give us
Platitudes.
about how Eversource is greening
Yeah.
everything, including their natural gas?
So the response I got from Eversource was that, yes, there's a lot to unpack in the questions I had sent. They're going to try to get the right people. And then try to find some dates that work. And he was supposed to, in this week or next, get back with some potential dates. I gave him some potential dates as well. But I would probably say, listen, don't bother if you're just gonna wave your hands, because that's not gonna help anybody. What we want is specific answers. And we don't need to know the plans per se. Right, if there's stuff.
But what's the process? I
What's
think
the
would be,
process
and
would be
what's
useful.
the, at a relatively nitty gritty, for a town of, I'd love to know who else is in our boat.
Agreed. Yeah. And so, so what I would suggest is we have that March 9th meeting right now. Let's see if we can use that for this topic. And if we're unable to get Eversource, maybe it's possible to push a meeting back later, right? We can just reschedule at a later date.
We have the April 13th, which we could also use as an
As the first onboarding.
onboarding with the
point.
consultant, so that they've had some time to digest things.
That's a good point. So maybe it would just be canceling the March meeting.
Yeah,
If we're unable to find this. Because I think we've kind of gone as far as we can without a consultant on board. Unless you guys have another topic that you think we really need to dive in on.
I mean, we've got some good ideas for events, but once again, that's not really,
That's not a full meeting.
that's not a full meeting, that's more a working group brainstorming type of
Right,
thing.
like just like Paul's work group was able
Yeah.
to kind of pull this together and just inform us on what they want to do.
Right,
Um,
the electric bill stuff.
And the electric bill thing, maybe I'll see if Joe, the buildings and clean energy group, which have a lot of overlap, and
that would be a good,
get us together just to
Yeah.
jointly pull something together,
okay,
which would, there's some good energy there.
right,
Unintended.
good energy.
Oh, God.
All right.
Okay.
All right, so I'll keep you guys up to date on whether or not Eversource comes back with some specifics and is able to meet with us. Otherwise, we will postpone or cancel the March meeting. Any other topics that people would like to see at a future meeting? One other thing that I should just point out is that typically committees have new chairs every year, or at least new votes for chairs now, and we're coming up on our year. It's almost been a year. Because our first meeting was March. Catherine, am I right?
I think it's March 21st.
March, just on the top of your head, March 21st, 2022. So you could discuss that.
We didn't.
I
pick a
nominate
chair.
you.
We didn't pick a chair until the
Discussion done.
second meeting.
We didn't pick,
Yeah.
okay, so April.
Yeah, April.
But this is an opportunity for anybody who might want to serve as chair to think about it and throw their candidacy.
One thing before we depose you, I just thought I'd mention, we did get the MAPC did a review of our GHG inventory. And they made a few minor tweaks, put it in new format. Paul, I think somebody had a question about the EV data in it, which is
Right.
outdated.
Right.
And there's really no way they're pulling off of a state database that comes from 2014, so it's woefully outdated.
But do we not have the ability to do that? I mean, we send out an excise tax bill every year.
They know exactly what people.
They know exactly the cars I've got. They
Yeah.
know what year it is, model it is.
Yeah.
So is that not a public record we could get from the town?
That's probably good, right? That's a tax base.
I think so.
I can't
I've never asked.
assume
for
why
it.
not.
Is there,
but-
is there,
Yeah.
I guess on a general basis, if there are data questions like this.
There might be
Is
some
there-
data privacy issues. That's the only thing.
But
I'm
is
wondering about.
there,
That's what individuals, you want to.
You want data. You don't
Yeah, and they
have-
have been, exactly. How many of these cars are there?
short of filing a freedom of information request, are there channels be helpful for us to know for getting this kind of information? The same with how many oil, homes burning oil, that sort of
And
thing.
how many solar rooftop installations they have?
we can find out. Ask Melissa.
I
Yeah.
was talking to somebody
So-
on the
That could be a project for an internship, by the way.
Newton Energy Committee who said they tried getting information on heat pump installations. And Mass Save refused to give them details, even though like how many units were installed in the city of Newton, saying that, oh, it's a privacy issue. And they have some heavy hitters on Newton's Energy Committee and still couldn't get it. And he also said that the building permits really weren't much help because they don't specifically say, 5-ton air source heat pump.
Right, yeah. So Cecilia, you said you might look around to see what's
Yeah,
available.
yeah.
You could find out, maybe we can figure out how to collect it. And my guess is it's not going to be sitting in a spreadsheet.
That would be wonderful.
Wouldn't it be wonderful? I don't know,
So-
maybe the excise bills is in a spreadsheet because they have to output those, but the oil tanks might not be,
Yeah.
and the solar installations might not be.
But so we have a base level greenhouse gas inventory, which
It's vetted now.
it's vetted, it's, you can say what you want about the MAPC tool, but it's a legitimate tool. It's got some generalities. It's looking at the overall grid solar and what's, within this region of the grid, as opposed to what's specifically on Needham roofs, but it's as a high level planning tool, it's pretty good.
All right, good.
And the question is, now that we have it, I suppose that becomes part of the consultant's tool.
It would be one of the inputs that the consultant would use to develop the
Yeah.
business as usual and the funnel. Wedge
Yeah,
analysis.
And
I'm
I
sorry.
think if I haven't put it in the SharePoint, I'll put it up there.
Okay. Yeah, so this did actually trigger one other conversation that Hank and I were having. So last summer's consultant, Andy Atala is looking. Did I say right? Did I say consultant?
Yes.
Or future consultant. Last
He was
summer's
more?
intern, Andy Atala, has expressed interest in potentially going out for another internship. And so that we got into a conversation more broadly about we were having another summer intern, what would we have them focus on? And there were several ideas. One of them was a general support of the climate action plan, potentially the CEA. Another was to continue the project around the pump station, where there's a potential for putting in a solar canopy, but it would require removal of trees. And so there was a extended net carbon impact analysis that might help make that decision.
So you
So
reference the UMass study about the 5-foot height on that.
I think he did where he,
Yeah, it'd be it's a connect, there is canopy, but basically a floor, forest floor.
forest floor, right? You get additional
Yeah, it's a meadow.
benefit.
Right.
Right. So that was another potential project. I know that Artie's group has suggested that we do a tree inventory. And there are apparently some digital tools akin to like Google
iTree.
Rooftop. So to get an estimate of what your current carbon sink is from your canopy. Which would be useful if we were, for example, to ever consider a tree bylaw.
Right.
So,
Yes, so there will probably be a tree summit coming up. We don't have a tree bylaw. And so having a tree committee, enforce a tree bylaw might be premature.
yes.
So we went to a tree, there's plans for 2024 to do a tree summit. So
Okay.
for all stakeholders and
And so it'd be useful to have a tree inventory.
yeah, and that we have, I think we're at 49% canopy coverage.
I'm not sure. Do you
I
just
would-
know that?
I looked it up. I did look it up. And there is data, and also they give it now a dollar value.
Ed better watch out. You're gonna take his job.
Doesn't,
No way,
doesn't, doesn't the,
I know nothing.
does the I canopy,
iTree.
I tree
Yeah.
give you a sense of the value of the trees?
It's supposed to look at
Yeah,
the
One of
variety.
one of the things that was really interesting with Andy's project in the summer was learning that the trees down by the pumping station are diseased and dying,
they would,
but they
yeah.
look nice on an aerial view.
Yeah, and iTree actually you can go and they measure the diameter and stuff, and some trees are rated as 0 value. If they have no, like, as long as I have a building or something like that, that's if you can go down the weeds. with it.
There's plenty of weeds there.
Yeah, but you should check it out.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, so I think we're gonna explore this idea. If you have any other thoughts about in your working groups, projects that could help advance down the field with the support of an intern. Please let me know. And we'll probably be putting together some sort of job description shortly. Or at least a list of projects.
Yeah, and typically, last summer, I guess we had to send a specific offer letter. Identifying not only what the intern would be doing, but also how it might relate to their continuing education within their focus study area. And so this was a good match with Andy, particularly anything related to, he's a conservation biology major.
Yeah,
And so
Middleburg.
it makes a lot of sense with those tasks.
Is this something that needs to be posted first before we're doing anybody?
Only for paying him. So in this instance, he gets grant funding through Middlebury. And he's able to live at home, so he doesn't have expenses that other interns might have if they were coming from California to try to work on this.
So the tree related projects are more up his alley.
Yes, and I think also offering him some diversity in what he's doing within the town. I mean, it does take time to monitor an intern, but the fact that he'd be coming back for a second summer is very beneficial. Because
Right.
he can sit down at his prayer desk and keep going.
And this will also be right in the thick of the CAP process.
Yes,
So there's likely a lot of ad hoc CAP stuff that will probably come out of that.
right. And he did help with some of the research, identifying other communities that already had climate action plans and links to them. And that was some of our early work last summer.
Yes.
All right, so I think that's it. There's no other projects. I think we just need a motion here.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Natasha, we have a motion. How do you vote? To
I,
adjourn? Rachel,
Yep. Aye.
Paul,
I.
Nick,
Wrote the motion.
that's right, but you vote?
Aye,
Okay,
since I asked it, a good question.
Yes.
yeah, and the chair votes aye. All right, so this meeting's adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
thank you.
See you now.
What do you think, Rob? Riveting? This is.